the video from Jeff. So let's check it out.
Hello, Chase Oaks, and welcome to Global Weekend on our Ripple Effect series. Whether you are online or you're at one of our physical locations right now. Right now, I'm actually at a location I can't talk about, but right now in this video, but you will hear about it later because there's so many incredible things that we get to be involved in the world. That's one of the big questions in Ripple Effect series as we think about a world full of need is how do we in a culture of so much relative wealth possibly impact our world where there's so much poverty because the needs are so vast. Also, there's so much lack of knowledge of Jesus. Well, today you're going to be encouraged because you not only can be involved, you actually already are. We're already, through our partners overseas, able to do tremendous good. We want to be able to extend that. And for those who are not engaged yet, today you'll learn how to be engaged. Here's what's going to happen today. You're going to hear from Ray Diaz, who's one of our elders. That's our board of directors. He's the CEO of Orphan Outreach. He's going to give a short talk. He's a former pastor too, great person and communicator. You're going to enjoy that. And then Jack Warren, one of our executive pastors, is going to share our approach, our global strategy, followed up by an interview with John Stanley, our global pastor, and Ray, on more specifically what's going on in some of our projects in particular, and how we can extend those and how we can participate. Thank you so much for being part of this service and for desiring to have a ripple effect in our world.
Yay! All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ray Diaz. Good morning to Legacy Campus, Woodbridge, Sloan Creek, and online. It's an honor for me to be here today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am part of the leadership team of a ministry called Orphan Outreach, and we serve orphaned and vulnerable children around the world. We work in 9 different countries, and we're serving about 19,000 children and families around the world. It's humbling. Chase Oaks is one of our key partners, and I love seeing ordinary people like you and me make a generational impact around the world. I also serve as an elder here. That's like the board of the church, and it's been an honor to do that. I'm on my 2nd year. They haven't kicked me out yet, and it's fun to go behind the scenes and see what an amazing church this is, the prayer, the discernment that goes into making decisions. So love being here, and if it's okay, I'm gonna share a couple more titles because titles kind of give us a sense about someone. I'm a husband, so I've been married for 20 years, happily married. I'm a you don't have to clap, but you can. It's not, 20 is not that big a deal. It's 40, 50, 60, yeah, okay. I'm a father. I got 2 incredible kids, so I'm a father. I'm a Gator, Florida Gators, go Gators. Wow, 1 person. That's like the first one all weekend. But we're pretty lonely here in Texas country. We did beat Ole Miss yesterday, so you're welcome for that. So I'm a Gator. I'm also a cat hater. Yeah, no applause for that. And Friday night they applaud, which is weird. I wouldn't go that far. I actually have 2 cats. I don't like them, they don't like me, and we just leave it that way. So I'm also, in my wife's phone, my contact information, she titled it Lord Business. That's the bad guy in the Lego movie who's OCD and neurotic. So it's not a compliment, it's not a good thing, but somehow it fits as well. So that's a little bit about me, and honestly, I'm really not that big into titles. I usually just go by Ray, but titles do tell us valuable information about someone, right? Titles can tell us what matters to someone, what's important to them, what's significant for them, right? So, for example, if I were to say, hey, that person's a mama bear, that tells you something, right? It's a mom, loves her kids, don't mess with her kids, right? That's what that tells you. If you were to hear, I'm an Aggie or a Longhorn or a Buckeye, that tells you information about that person, what school they went to, what football team they cheer for, and so on and so forth, right? If you hear the title Swiftie, right? We know what that means, right? It means someone's got poor taste in music. And then, just kidding. I'm surrounded by Swifties in my families too. So, and if you hear someone a title coffee lover, what's that mean, right? It means they love coffee. You can't have a coherent conversation with them before they've had coffee, right? So Titles are important. They tell us valuable information. So what I want to do this morning to start off is tell you some of the titles that God has. And some of these God gives himself, and some of them are ascribed to God. But again, these titles tell us what matters to God. So I'm going to give you a few of his titles. The first one is the one Jesus gave God in the Lord's Prayer. It's in Matthew chapter 6, verse 9. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Our Father is a title that tells us something about God. Jesus calls God our Father. And it was scandalous 2,000 years ago, and it's scandalous till today. But what it tells us is that you matter to God. That his children, his people, you matter to God. So much so that he invites you into his family and invites you to call him Father, because he's a good, good Father who wants to provide and protect. And you matter to God. That's what the title tells us about God. There's another title in the Old Testament. This one's in Psalm 68. And it's where David ascribes God something similar to our Father. Here's what it says in Psalm 68. "A father to the fatherless, a defender of the widow, is a God in his holy dwelling." That's another title that tells us something about God. It tells us that they matter to God, that the fatherless matter to God. So God is our heavenly Father, but he's also the father to the fatherless. You matter and they matter. So who are they? They are the 153 million orphan children around the world, kids who've been abused and abandoned and neglected. They are the 713 million people living in extreme poverty today. That's about $2 a day that they live on, and they have no access to basic services, and they matter to God. It's the 3 billion people that don't have access to the gospel, most of those under the age of 18, and they matter to God. As their Father, these people, these children matter deeply to God, and the invitation to us is to care for those people, those children. It's not just the titles that tell us what matters to God. It's what God does with these titles. It's what he does with his power. So I'm going to read you one more verse here. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 10. And you're going to see a heap load of titles for God, but it's also going to tell us what he does with that title. That's what I want you to focus on. So here's what it is. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17. "For the Lord your God is God of gods, the Lord of lords. He is the great God, the mighty and awesome God, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes." So 6 or 7 titles there given to God. And what's he do with those titles? He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. Don't miss that. The most powerful being in the universe uses his power on behalf of the most vulnerable. The most powerful defends the most vulnerable. And that's what God invites us to do. He invites us to use our treasures and our talents and our times and our titles on behalf of those that are suffering around the world, right? I mentioned I'm a father. I have 2 kids. They're 17 and 11. So they're going through school right now. And one of the biggest challenges for me, the hardest day for me, is parent-teacher conference, right? Have you ever been to one of those? They're tough, right? And they're tough because for me personally as a father, it's hard to hear criticism, even constructive criticism about my children. I know they're not perfect. I can give you a list. I just don't want you to tell me, right? And it's a hard, so no matter how many times I've done this, I always tell myself, Ray, stay cool, stay calm, stay collected, have an open mind, regulate yourself. But the first negative thing they say, it's on. And it makes no sense. No matter what they say, I defend my kids. Your daughter talks too much in class. Of course she does. She's gonna be a lawyer. She has to learn to talk, so she has to talk, right? Your son is running through the hallways. Good, he's working on track and field and cross country. If he's gonna get a scholarship, he's gotta run, get that mileage in, right? So it doesn't matter what they say, and it doesn't make sense to me, but that's what a father does. I defend my kids. And a couple years ago, a teacher came and said this, that changed things. The teacher said, do you know your son is brilliant? That he's a quiet genius and that he should consider a job in the medical field? How do you think I felt towards that teacher who saw something in my son that I've known all along? Lots of people have seen something, but who saw and believed in him the way I believe in him, right? And not just that, she advocated for him to get this prestigious award. And I felt so happy with her because she was advocating, defending, fighting for my son. Think about how you feel when someone does that towards your children or your spouse or a family member, and they say, hey, did you know your child is gifted, is special, is unique? It feels great. And even more, how do you feel when someone defends your children? So, how do you think God feels when we fight for his children? How does God feel when we defend his children? How does our Father, the Father of the fatherless, feel when we advocate on behalf of his kids? Because these are his children that he knows by name. He knows every single detail about them, their prayers, their needs, their hunger, their fears, their dreams. So how does God feel when Chase Oak says, we will fight for your children? We will defend their cause, right? Because that's what God calls his people to do. In the New Testament, the brother of Jesus would write a letter and he would make it very clear. He would say that, hey, there's a religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless, and it's this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep yourself from being polluted by this world. The true religion was taking care of those who had no power, who could not take care of themselves. And what this verse tells me is that there is a pure and faultless religion, but there's also an impure religion, a religion that's full of fault, a religion that's twisted, that's not what God intended. And I think that's a religion that ignores the Father's heart. It's a religion that ignores the cries of the poor around the world, because God created his church to take care of his people, to be the vehicle through which we took care of those that could not take care of themselves. So when we go into the mission and do that, God smiles. Let me close with this quote here. Here's what it says. If you want to make God smile, isn't that a cool image, making God smile? Follow him into this world. Serve his agenda, which always includes the poor, the oppressed, the orphan, the widows, and those in need. So for us to truly be God's people, the things that break God's heart must break our hearts too. And that's what the Chase Oaks Global Strategy is all about. It's a way of us aligning our hearts to the heart of God. So I'm gonna have Jack come up, and Jack's gonna tell us more about that global strategy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ray. I think Ray and I are extremely confused at this point, because Ray said he was a cat hater on Friday night, and the people just broke out into applause. And then said it at 9 o'clock service, and you had a lot of applause. Not this service. You guys love cats, don't you? Wow. I am very confused with this church. One thing that's not confusing from what you just heard is God cares deeply about the poor. He cares deeply about the most vulnerable. He cares about those who are fatherless. He cares about the widows. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about that? My prayer going into this weekend is that God would break my heart for what breaks his, and for all of us, that God would break our hearts for what breaks his. And when that happens and God moves in our hearts and we're like, okay, there are millions of people that need help around the world, There are the most poor of the poor around the world that we could go help. There's people in extreme poverty who are super, super vulnerable, who need our support, need our help, and we're so privileged where we live. What are we gonna do with it? It's a huge question, and there's all kinds of approaches that we can take. But several years ago, we had a guy come to our office, and he worked for an organization called Bright Hope World. And he wanted to meet with us one afternoon, and so several of us met with him, named Rob Perdue. And Rob shared with us the strategy of Bright Hope World in terms of what they do for the poor and the vulnerable, the widows and the orphans. And here's what he said. We go and find the areas around the world that have all of those categories of people. The people that need the most help, mostly people who live for less than $1 a day. They're in extreme poverty. We go find those people, and then we go find a leader in that community, in that country, in that region who's doing something about it. A leader who is a passionate Christ follower, a leader who has proven character, a leader who has vision for impact that they know God would like to do through them, and a leader that's doing it and practicing it. And then what they do is they don't just immediately say, we're here to help you. They watch that leader for several years, and they make sure that that leader does have the proven character and that they've got a giant vision. And then they match that leader with people like us in churches like us, and they share the vision and the strategy that that leader has, and they share what God is doing there, and they encourage us to come in and help fulfill that vision. But to do it in a short-term way, to do it in a way that creates sustainability there, so that after we've done it for a number of years, we step away from the resourcing, and that just continues and continues and goes on and on and on. And it's like, okay, that is a genius model. But I mean, honestly, when I heard it, I was like, that's too good to be true. I'm not sure that's happening. And then they shared stories of how that's happening. We went from that meeting right into an elder meeting, and we shared this, and we're like, okay, we've got to investigate that. If that's truly happening in the areas of the world that have the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable, we want to be a part of that. So we started praying, then a number of us started going and seeing some of these things, and here we are today with all kinds of partnerships that have happened. My wife so believed in this. She quit her job, and she went on staff with Bright Hope for over a year, she and a friend named Linda. And she went on trips with them. Now, here's a quick father fail story. The first trip she went on, she was gonna go for 3 weeks. First day that she's gone, she's entrusted me to take care of our 2 young daughters. They were like in elementary school at the time. And I kind of freak out when Susie wasn't around, and it's my job to take care of my kids. If it's over 24 hours, that's kind of a scary thing for us dads. And within 12 hours of her getting on a plane and leaving, my daughter comes downstairs and says, hey, Dad, I think I cut my finger and this could be bad. And I look, and it's a giant gash, and it's bleeding, and it's not just a Band-Aid kind of thing. It's, okay, we got to go to Care Now or the ER. So we did. She got like 4 stitches. The next day I called my wife, and it's like, hey, I know you really believe in Bright Hope, and you're doing a great thing, but let me just tell you what happened the first 24 hours. She did not turn around and come home. She's like, you got this, you can handle it, nothing else bad happened. But let me tell you where she went. She went to India, and in India, she met people who were leading orphanages, who had a great plan for sustainability, and they were caring for the fatherless, and they were doing amazing work. She went to Thailand, and there she met leaders who were rescuing girls out of sex trafficking and teaching those girls how to sew, and they created sewing centers, and these girls all had income, and these single moms now had income, and they could support themselves with sustainable business. She went to Ethiopia, and she met church planters, and she met a man named Warku that we had a partnership with. So let me show you Warku's picture. There's Warku. Warku had a vision for Gondar, Ethiopia, and the surrounding region. And that vision was this: there were a number of widows in that community that needed desperate help, and there were not people to care for them. Warku figured out a way to do that. There was a whole region that needed the presence of Jesus and needed the love of Jesus and needed churches, and Warku worked with people to start planting churches. And to sustain all of those things, he had a vision to start a school. And today there is a school with over 2,000 students. And when we first started working with him, there was a field in this area. I went and I saw it, and I watched it be constructed. Just a field, and now it's a school with over 2,000 students, 130 staff, And as a result of tuition, they're able to help support feeding the widows in that city. So you can see, yeah, you should clap for that. That's awesome. You can see how a vision that God puts on somebody's heart, and when we come alongside and say, hey, we believe in you, we see what you're doing, you're sharing the love of Jesus with people, you're meeting tangible needs, and you're helping the poorest of the poor. We want to support that, so we did, and you see what has happened, and it continues to go on to this day. Well, we have more partnerships now. So we went from that region of the world to say, hey, Bright Hope, where's another big area of the world where we need to help? And they pointed us to Egypt. So today, we're going to get to hear from John Stanley, our outreach pastor, global outreach pastor. Jeff Jones, who you saw on the screen, is actually back. He arrived yesterday, so he's going to come up here as our lead pastor and share a little bit as well. And I'm going to invite Ray back up to share a panel with us. And so I'm going to ask those guys if they'll come on up this way. And there's Jeff. I was a little nervous. I didn't see Jeff on the front row. Jeff's been battling a little intestinal challenge as a result of his trip.
Yeah, I brought a friend back from India, a little amoeba named Bob.
Hopefully that friend is doing okay. All right? You're our friend,
great.
and you seem to be doing great. So really glad that you're back. Sorry for those struggles.
Yeah,
but I'm really, really glad that you're back. John, welcome back. Thanks for representing our church and going to India, going to Egypt to get updated on what's happening there. And Ray, again, thank you for your leadership with good
Orphan
Lord.
Outreach.
Yes, Orphan Outreach.
No worries.
I got stuck on Bright Hope with Orphan Outreach. It's amazing what you're doing. And Ray is the leader of that organization. He said our team, Ray leads that thing. He's a humble man. So thank you. Okay, Jeff, so you just got back.
Yeah.
You had been to Egypt before.
Yeah.
And so a lot has happened since that first trip. Give us an update. Tell us what you see God doing.
Yeah,
there.
so I mentioned India because we were there later to visit, to meet a new partner for the future, to discern and all that. So we'll see what happens. But in Egypt, we're 5 years into a 10-year investment and project there. And man, it was inspiring. I had high expectations of what could happen there because these partners are doing such a great job. But they've way outstripped expectation. So much so that I'm like, man, John, we've got to invest deeper. We've got to invest more. John's our global pastor. And it's a great example of the kind of partners that we're talking about because they would do this without us. They're the managing partner. It's their vision. God's using them. And in their incredible bright spot in an otherwise dark part of the world, spiritually dark, as well as working among the poorest of the poor and the kind of darkness that poverty produces. And they're doing incredible stuff and would do it without us. However, we get to come alongside as a resource partner, which means with our resources, they can go way farther, way faster. It puts an exponent on what they are able to accomplish. And it was just really cool to see that and to see all the amazing things that were happening. And one of the big projects that we fund is multiple revolving loan programs, and that works among the poorest of the poor in that country in Egypt. And by revolving loan program, I mean, instead of just giving money to people that need help so they can buy food, that then keeps them dependent on somebody to keep giving them money, instead, through these loan programs, we give, or they give loans, along with training and how to start businesses and accountability and community and all this care that goes along with it, wraparound care. But they give a loan. And so it could be in the rural areas, $50 or $100. In the urban areas, it might be $1,000 or $2,000, but it enables them to then start a way of generating an income, start a little business, or something like that then begins to grow so that they're able to meet their own needs. They're not dependent on anybody. And not only that, many of them, it grows and they employ other people. And it's just amazing to think about what $25 or $50 or $1,000 can do in somebody's life to completely change their life, to completely get them to a place of relative flourishing financially and spiritually too. Because all of these loans are they're all dispersed and managed through local churches all over all in different parts of the country. because we don't want to just lift people out of financial poverty, but also spiritual poverty. We want people to find Jesus if possible and to know about him and for their life to be changed holistically and forever. And so it's a way that we can help the church there generate incredible goodwill in a culture, it's a Muslim culture, and to see a whole lot of people come to know Jesus because of it. And because we really work hard to give in a way that America is not these American Christians are not the hero, or whatever Chase Oaks Church is not the hero, but those local churches are the ones who are who are the heroes, so to speak, who demonstrate God's power and love. And so it was incredible seeing that. And it's one thing to just kind of talk about it generally, but John, you've been there more than I have, and make that specific, put people to the category.
Yeah, thanks. It is a privilege for me to be able to travel on behalf of Chase Oaks to many places around the world and just see some of the great things that people are doing that you are supporting, and you're enabling them to do those things. We are working with about 17 churches in Egypt that are doing this work that we're going to talk about. And there are 12 projects that are happening right now because of Chase Oaks support in Egypt through those churches. But I only have time to do maybe 3 examples today of 3 different types, because everyone up here knows how long I can talk about certain things. And so, in fact, if you would like to know more about it after today, I'd be happy to take you to breakfast or lunch or coffee and talk to you for hours. So just let me know if that's something you'd like to have. But there are 2 types of empowerment loans. And we use the term empowerment because that's exactly what they do, as Jeff described. It changes people's lives. There's, first of all, livestock loans. And so livestock loans can be cattle, chickens, goats, whatever. They can purchase these animals and then create more animals, as you can understand. But also they have byproducts that they have, like chickens have eggs and cows produce milk, and so they can utilize those, sell those products in the marketplace. Then they can also use those to breed and do more. So that's really kind of a fan favorite of a lot of people that are living in more of the urban areas, rural areas. So we see that. We also see those who have more of a business mindset, and they really want to create a business. They have a vision, as Jack was talking about earlier. They have a vision for something, and they've been in business before maybe, and they know how to make it happen. And so they get a loan, and they open markets. They open small little market stores, grocery stores, resale of any kind of goods that they might want to resell. We've seen people take loans to get a tuk-tuk. And if you've traveled internationally, you know what a tuk-tuk is, but it's essentially a motorcycle with a kind of a canvas cover, 3-wheeled motorcycle, and people ride in it, and it's a taxi all around town. So they can make money doing that. And so there are many different opportunities and many different visions that people have to serve or to have a business. I want to tell you about one. There's a gentleman we met back in March. Didn't get to see him this trip, but his name is Saeed. Saeed had a very, very successful business 5 years ago. He has a wife and 3 children, and about 5 years ago, he lost everything as far as the business is concerned. He stopped on the side of the road to help another vehicle that had lost its load and clear it out of the street. When he did that, there were several others that were helping, and a car came crashing through that whole group of people, killed several. He survived. But as a result of that, he spent the next 4 years with 14 surgeries, in and out of the hospital. He broke every bone in his body, he says, but one arm. And he has a vision, or had a vision, to do something with his life and create a business. So somehow he got connected with one of the churches there. I don't even know how that happened, but he got connected with a church. The church gave him a loan, and he purchased a lot of shoes inventory for a shoe shop that he had designed to open. He was able to rent a small building in the narrow streets of Cairo, and he's doing really well today. He's very successful, and he's having a great time. And his name, Saeed, means happy. And he is one happy man right now because he's supporting himself, his wife, and his children, and has a life like he used to have. And so that really empowered him to be able to do what he wanted to do.
And when we talk about revolving funds, it's revolving because they're paid back. And so the money that we invest just keeps working. And so, they're paid back depending on the program, anywhere from 95% to 100% of the loans are paid back, which means it just keeps going. And we may inject a little bit of money every once in a while after they get started, but once they get started, it just keeps moving. So, yeah.
Great. And the second area that I want to just talk to you about a little bit is education of preschool children. There are so many children running the busy streets of Cairo outside of where they live, small children before they've going to school, and they're running around with unsupervised and it's not a safe place for them and not a good place for them. And the churches saw that, and the churches said, we need to make a difference here. We need to take these children, bring them into our church, and do a preschool program for them. And so they are helping these kids that would not be entering school totally ready to become ready to enter school when they go into kindergarten. And they've opened up 3 of them. We intentionally funded 1, and they took that money that we had for 1 and they made 3 out of it. So they're very resourceful. Now they have 3 churches that have childhood education for those kids, and doing a fantastic job. And the cool thing about it too is it employs teachers as well who have a need to work. And so there's a ripple effect there as well. They've also often opened a couple of centers that are designed for special needs kids. These are kids mostly with ADHD or who have autism. And they obviously are starting school not quite ready to be there. And so they want to come alongside those kids. So they've opened two sensory centers. And if you're familiar with that, it's basically where they can go and they can learn how to connect to people, connect to things, which is difficult for them. And so they've opened 2 of those, and they're just going crazy with those and having a great time teaching those children and getting them ready for school as well. The last area that I want to talk about today is refugees. In the last 5 years, there have been about 9 million Sudanese and Syrian refugees that have fled to Egypt for asylum and for safety. And Egypt is an open country for those types of people that have left everything, left nothing really, if you think about it, and come with nothing to a place where they have nothing, and they're reliant upon anyone and everyone who would come alongside them and help them. And that's what our partners over there are doing. They have refugee centers that offer all kinds of short-term helps like shelter, clothing, blankets, food that they offer them. But they also do some vocational training. They teach sewing to the women, and they teach men how to do certain things that will help them get a job in Egypt. Jeff reminded me when we were there, he said, Egypt has always been open to refugees. I said, oh, really? What do you mean? And he says, well, you remember Joseph and Mary took baby Jesus to Egypt to flee Herod. So I think that's really cool to kind of have that understanding of a country that has that feeling towards others. And we're able to be in that country and be a part of that. And it's such a blessing for us to be able to do that. And so, again, all this happens through local churches. And God is blessing so many people because of your contribution and their service over there.
I love hearing the partnership. I mean, several key words that they just said. Partnership is one of those. Local leaders is another one. The local church is another one. And God is making heroes out of those local leaders. And really, God's the hero doing it through them. So just love our Bright Hope partnerships and love your generosity for it. And Orphan Outreach, get the name right this time for you, Ray. Orphan Outreach is another amazing partner that God is using all over the world. And you come right out of the book of James, of pure religion, is caring for the orphans and the widows. You do it, and that's such a big umbrella, like, okay, orphans and widows. But you've got a specific story of, hey, this is what it means when you go and you help an orphan. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for sure. And again, the word I want to focus on is empowerment, because Jeff used that word, John used that word, and I feel like our job is to empower these families, especially orphans and widows. And the story I'm going to tell is of a widow named Myra and her children. And we have a picture of her coming up. Myra is the woman in the middle. And one of the challenges with poverty is that it's generational, it's cyclical, and families get stuck. And she was stuck. Her parents were living in squatter community. She's living in a squatter community. But through a local church, she found Christ, she found faith, and it was just beautiful. She's a woman of faith, but she was never able to go to school. So her greatest dream was, can I have my children go to school? And then all three were in school, but her oldest one there, the tall young man there named Elijah, he got kicked out of school because he had a growth spurt and didn't have shoes that fit. So he would have to go to school barefoot. And in Honduras, even though it's free education, it's not really free. You need a uniform, you need fees, you need supplies, and you need shoes. He didn't have any. But she's a woman of faith. She gathered her children together and said, hey, let's pray to our Father. And they prayed for a miracle that God will provide a pair of shoes so Elijah can go to school, Elias can go to school. 30 minutes later, she gets a call from our program saying, your son's been accepted into our scholarship program, which provides him a scholarship for school, uniform, and shoes are included in the uniform. So she was able, yeah, go ahead. I mean, I was there when she told the story. She was jumping up and down and crying. She is so inspiring. And I think what's cool about the story is that my family got to visit them on a Chase Oaks mission trip. And this is our family there. And my nephew was there as well. And my daughter, for them to see, number one, God answers specific prayers. And we can learn from this woman who lives in squatter condition, but is teaching us about contagious faith. But then secondly, we got to witness a cycle being broken because Myra couldn't go to school and she's in poverty. Her parents in the same condition, her grandparents are in the same condition. But her son is now in school, junior, studying agricultural engineering, and he is breaking that cycle as a young man of faith and now educated. Who knows what God's gonna do with him? His siblings are on the program too. And to me, that just represents one story of the thousands that are being changed because of what Chase Oaks is doing around the world.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm very humbled just to hang out with Ray for the weekend because his passion is like contagious. You get it, right? You feel it. You're like, okay, let's go with that guy. Let's go where he's going. And we actually have some opportunities for those kind of things. We've been with you before. We're going in the future. John, would you tell us, as you lead all of our global efforts, tell us about some opportunities that we have to go.
Yeah, we do have annually 2 opportunities, or 2 partners that we enjoy going on mission trips with. First one, and they're both basically around children and the needs of those children. So first one is in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, just across the border. We have a very inexpensive, short 4-day trip that we take 4 times a year. And we go over there and we work with the children there in the orphanage and just do great work with them, love on them, care for them, bring something that we can offer to them and fun. And these are children who, obviously, that they're the orphans and the most vulnerable. So we want to be there for them. Secondly, we also do a trip each year with Orphan Outreach, and we love it, going down to La Paz, Honduras, and working with Nico there. It's a ministry that has a ministry to the public school. The public school finds children that are struggling, and they advise their parents to send them to this ministry, and this ministry then comes alongside them, helps them through their school things, but then also works with them in biblical teaching and learning how to deal or work with others. They give them a great meal every day. But we go down and we do programs for them, and it's really fun. I've been the last 2 years, and it's just a real blessing to be able to go down. So either 4 times to Nuevo Laredo or 1 time to Honduras. We'd love to have you join us. If you'd like to know more about that, we do have a meeting coming up on tomorrow night right here in the Legacy Room. And it's going to be from 7 to 8, just a casual getting together and hearing about those 2 trips and what they entail and how you might want to be involved.
And I love the opportunities. When you go on one of these trips, God does 2 things. He really grabs your heart. I mean, you just can't help it. It's going to happen when you go on one of those trips. But what we're not asking you to do is we're not asking you to quit your job, sell your house, and go move to one of these countries. We're just saying, hey, just take a short time, if you can, pray about it, see if you can create some margin in your schedule, go on one of these trips, and just watch what God is doing and see what he's doing. And I promise you will never be the same. So thank you for the informational meeting. We'll be there tomorrow night. So there's other ways you can also participate in making a global impact and this ripple effect globally. Jeff, I'm going to ask you, since you're fresh off of this, you see the difference that God is making. Tell us other things that we can do and actually close us out in the service as well.
Yeah, two big ones. And one we're going to do together, and we're going to change the world. So you can say, hey, what did y'all do at Church State? We changed the world. And we really will. But that's the second thing. The first thing also certainly does change things, and that is the giving part of this. So all of this that we're able to do goes through our fund, our global fund. It's above and beyond our regular budget. And that's the way we started doing things about 20 years ago, to be able to funnel more resources to these projects and to these partnerships. And it's a great answer for the tension, at least I feel, and hopefully you feel too, and that is this: that in a world like this, where we live in a place like America, we live in the West, which means you and I, whether you feel like it or not, you're actually living the right lifestyles of the rich. Maybe not famous, but you're living that. I mean, we're in the top few percentage points of the world's wealthy just because we're here. And that comes with responsibility, biblically, from God's perspective. Like in 2 Corinthians, Paul lets the believers know that God allows some people, some Christians in some parts of the world to have more so that they can give and provide for those in other parts of the world that have not enough. And that's just the way God works. And in other parts of the Bible, it talks about how we actually rob God if we spend what God actually wants us to give to the poor, which that's a tension. Well, what do I do in a world like this? What, do I spend anything? How do I impact the world? What could I even do? And I think it does mean living a godly life as us means living in that tension. And for me, the Global Fund is a great way to go somewhere with that tension, because I know that 100% of those dollars are going to these partnerships and are in doing incredible good. And so for Christy and me, we give to our regular fund as our regular giving. And, we talk about here, give, save, live, and so on. And we give to our general fund and very happily do. We love what God is doing at Chase Oaks. But in addition to that, we always look, okay, God, what are you calling us to give to the Global Fund? And over the last almost 20 years, you, Chase Oakers, have given $10 million to the Global Fund. Think about that. Above and beyond our regular giving, above and beyond all the local good that we do, above all the gifts for good, thank you. It's pretty remarkable, the generosity around this place. And thank you. It is incredible. And when you think about what that $10 million has done and will continue to do as we continue to grow it. So let me encourage you to do that. If you want to give, everywhere you give online or on our app, there's always a drop down that has general fund and local good and global, the Global Fund or global good. And that link right there will help you as well. In addition to the giving part, this is where we're going to change the world. We're going to do it right now because we're going to pray. And prayer is not a trite thing. Prayer is not, pray. Prayer moves the activity of God, who has all the power of the universe, to do what is unthinkable. And right now, when I going to Egypt and going to other parts of the world that I'm just coming off from, where there's so much need and so much darkness, but you see what God is doing through his church so powerfully, bringing light and hope and peace is just incredible. And so I want us to pray and move the hand of God, even in this moment, in a way that really will impact people's lives globally. And so I want us to bow our heads together. And I'm going to guide us through praying rather than just listening to me pray. I'm going to ask you to pray. So just you and God here, just talk to him. Like I always say, prayer is just talking to God in your own words. And first, just in light of all we've talked about, just say, God, would you break my heart with what breaks your heart? Would you really help me have your heart for people I don't know, we'll probably never see, but that you think about all the time around the world? Ask God just to speak in your heart right now too, to say, God, what would you have me do in a world of so much need, God, what would you have me do? What are you calling me to do? And then let's pray for our partners, places like Egypt and Honduras and Kenya and Uganda and other parts of the world we work. Pray that God will resource them and encourage them. I just came from a part of the world where there's a lot of Christian persecution that's severe. Just right now, pray for Christians who are facing severe and devastating persecution. That God would bring peace and strength and safety somehow. Father, we thank you that you are always at work in the world. You're always building your church, and you call us to be part of what you're doing. And as much as spiraling down, we know that so much is spiraling up because of your work. And we thank you for allowing us to be a part of it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for